Hey guys, so in this video we're going to be designing an app similar to Instagram where you can see people sharing their photos and videos, and we're going to be doing that in Figma. So I already have Figma opened up, so if you don't have it, go ahead and make sure to sign up on figma.com. This is the website where you can go ahead and either log in if you already have an account or sign up for Figma. I already have an account, so I've logged in and I've actually downloaded the desktop version for Figma. You can use the web version as well. They both work pretty much the same way, but I just prefer the desktop version. So once you go ahead and sign up or log in, then you can go ahead and open up Figma, and it should look something like this. And from here, you can go ahead and start a new project. You can either create a new FigJam file, which is great for whiteboard and diagrams as they mentioned here, or you can go ahead and design a prototype using a new file or a design file, which you can open up from here. So let's go ahead and create a new design file to begin with. I like keeping my projects clean and keeping all my files organized. So it's always a good idea to give it a new name. So why don't we go ahead and change this untitled by double clicking and change it to photo sharing app Mockup. Of course, we don't have a name for this project, so that's what we're naming it generically. But if you're working with a company, you can go ahead and name it, whatever company, Mockup, or as you'd like. And this is in my drafts folder right now, which is where most files get created. And then you can go ahead and move it around to different teams. But for now, we're going to keep it in drafts, and we're going to go ahead and first start with a wireframe. So essentially, a wireframe allows us to create a low fidelity version of the mockup without actually having to put the color scheme or the typography or a lot of the content inside of the actual screen. Whereas with a wireframe, we're just trying to achieve what we want the layout to look like, what we want placed where. And so that's why we come up with a wireframe in order to put together our designs, or mockups in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and create a text by pressing the T key on my keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag a text box over here in my canvas. I'm just going to go ahead and write the requirements for the project that we have here. So I'm going to do app requirements, and on a new line, I'm going to do a bullet point with a dash, and we're going to do the main page where all the posts are. We're going to do a chat page, and pretty much that's it. We're going to stick to these two pages to keep it simple to begin with. Now, of course, you could go a little bit more advanced and design the profile page and settings and so on. But to keep this video simple and not too long, I want to go ahead and focus on these two pages. So now that we know what the requirements are, I'm going to go ahead and first set the font a little bit bigger so you can read this and put that on the side. And so let's go ahead and create a wireframe for these two pages. Now, to design for a specific device size, we need to create a frame. So frame typically represents a screen on your mobile or web device. So in this case, we're designing for a mobile app. So we're going to go ahead and press the A key, which will go ahead and open up that frame option. Now, if you don't want to use the shortcuts, you can also go ahead and just hit frame over here. You can also bring it up by pressing F on your keyboard. That will do the same thing. So after you press F, it will go ahead and give you some options on the side over here. The beautiful part about Figma is that they already determined what all the different device sizes are. So let's say you're designing for an iPhone 13 Pro Max. This is the dimensions for the screen. So you don't need to go figure it out or Google it like we used to do when we were designing in Photoshop. But now you can actually go ahead and use the device size here. So let's do iPhone 11 Pro Max. And we'll go ahead and input a frame of the iPhone 11 Pro Max size in here. Now, with responsive design, you should be able to make it so that your designs will be flexible for small adjustments in the device size. So if it's a slightly bigger device or slightly smaller device, using constraints, we can go ahead and make the app work with all device sizes. In this mini course, we're going to also be covering the constraints part. But to begin with, let's focus on our wireframe. So why don't we go ahead and duplicate this frame because we want two pages in our app. So to duplicate things, you can go ahead and make sure they're selected by selecting them. I know this is selected because it's highlighted in my layers panel on the left side over here, and also it has this blue border around it with a blue title, whereas if you click away anywhere else on the canvas, you can see it doesn't have the blue border or the blue title. So that's how you know things are selected. Once you do have something selected, you can either duplicate things by going to Edit, Duplicate, or as a shortcut on the Mac, you can hit Command D, or on Windows, it's Control D. Let's go ahead and press Command D while we have that selected. And now we have two frames. Let's rename them properly. So let's go ahead and change the name of this one to our main page, and the name of this one to our chat page. So if the name doesn't suggest already, the main page is similar to on Instagram, where you see the posts shared by different users. But of course, we're going to use a slightly different design. We're not going to exactly copy what Instagram has to keep it a little bit unique. So first things first, in those apps, what you see is a navigation bar at the top. On Google Images, I'm just bringing up some screenshots from Instagram's app. So as you can see, they have this top section which is called the navigation bar. This navigation bar allows you to go to different pages and navigate through the app. And you can also place objects inside of it, such as buttons for the camera, for the DMs. So you have this top section that's usually dedicated to the navigation bar. So in order to design a navigation bar, you have two options. One is that you can either go to the Apple Design Resources for Figma by searching that on Google, and that should be Apple under Apple Design Resources. You can go ahead and download it, and although it says Sketch, it will actually go ahead and open up in Figma as well, because you can import Sketch files into Figma. I have a video on YouTube on how you can do that as well, so you can check that out. I'll leave the link somewhere over here on the screen. But in the meantime, another way is to actually just go directly into Figma. All right, so back in here, let's go ahead and draw out where we want our navigation bar to go. So I'm going to hit R on my keyboard and draw a rectangle right around here, which is where I want my navigation bar to go. And it should be about this big. Don't worry about the color right now. We're just putting stuff on the page and just explaining what it is. So I'm going to hit T on my keyboard again and write navigation bar here, so we know what exactly this is for. And now let's go ahead and create a square for our posts over here that we want. So let's go ahead and hold Shift while we're drawing it to get a perfect square. Shift essentially locks the proportions, the width and the height, so we can go ahead and create a shape that's even on both the width and the height. So let's do 335 for this one. I think that should look good. And space it out like so. And of course, now we want also our profile page for the user who's sharing this post. So let's hit O for an oval shape. Hold Shift and do a circle of let's do 50 by 50. And as you notice, I'm using the alignment tools here. While I'm dragging, I'm making sure that everything's aligned. So we want these two to be left aligned. Alignment is really important in UI because you don't want things to look, off like that. You want to make sure everything looks properly aligned. And I just undid by hitting Command Z there. Let's create a text here and put username. Whoops, typo there. Username, and then I believe from here. We could do a little comment section down here, but we're going to keep it simple and do a like button instead. So why don't we create a little button down here, and we're going to go ahead and just change the fill of this one to a little bit of a darker gray, so we can place it on top of here, and we're going to have this as a like button. So essentially we want in our wireframe to duplicate these elements. Now I selected all of them together by holding Shift. So while you have one thing selected, you can hold Shift and select multiple things on the screen at the same time. And then we're going to go ahead and duplicate by pressing Command D. And now we get a duplicate of all of that. And just drag it down until we have another copy. So that's going to be our main page. We're going to have a navigation bar at the top. And over here, actually, we're going to have another button for the going to the chat page. And so from the chat page, we're ready to place our wireframe in there as well. So why don't we go ahead and copy the navigation bar, the item selected for it, and hold Alt to draw a duplicate in here, or drag a duplicate in there. We don't need this button over here to go to the messages since we're already in the chat or messages, and we just want a back button over here on the left side. And for our chat, essentially what we want is a list of users who's messaged this person or this user of this app. So let's go ahead and hold Shift, select the username and the circle in here or the ellipse, and drag a copy over here. And one of the cool things about Figma is that once you duplicate something one time, so if you hold Alt, drag a copy over here with, let's say, 20 pixels of spacing between them, which seems pretty good, you can go ahead and hit Command D and have that duplicate action repeat with the same spacing between the elements. So if I keep doing duplicate, it will keep repeating or creating a new copy, but at the same spacing that we have within our first duplicate. So we can keep doing that for as many users as we want, and so this will represent the users that they can essentially chat with or they have messages with. So this is kind of a simple layout for our app. This is our wireframe right now, very low fidelity. So as you can see, there's not much detail, there's not much color. And that's really the point of it, is to see what data do you need in each page and what do you want to place where. In the real Instagram app, at the bottom over here, you also see a tab bar to switch between multiple different pages. But of course, because we're keeping it to just 2 pages, we can use a navigation bar over here to navigate between these 2 pages. Cool. So now we're ready to get started with our design. So to actually get started with our design, let's go ahead and turn these elements into an actual design that looks good and pleasing to the eye with a color scheme in mind. And while we do that, we want to also go ahead and use some icons and some sample images to fill in our app with some sample data. But that's the very last step. For now, we want to go ahead and actually produce these elements on our screen for the real app. All right, so let's go ahead and create new frames for our mockups. I'm going to come down here, press F, and click on iPhone 12 or 11 Pro Max. Duplicate this one over here using Alt. And then I'm going to go ahead and name this our main page and our chat page. And this is where our actual design is going to go. So for our navigation bar, we're going to go ahead and keep it simple and draw a rectangle like this. And actually, I think 120 pixels in height is better. And instead of this color, we're going to go ahead and make it, more of a light gray color. Something like this should look good. And we're going to go ahead and add a border or a stroke. And we're going to do on the outside. So we just have that bottom one over here. And we're going to do light gray like this. I think 1 pixel is good enough. So that's going to be our navigation bar. Let's create a text and write photo app. That's just going to be the title of the app. You can go ahead and name it whatever you want. If you're on a certain page, you could totally put the name of the page. I know Instagram has their Instagram name on the left side over here. So for our photo app, we're just going to leave that name as is over here. We're going to go ahead and just center it vertically using this button and make sure that it's vertically aligned in my navigation bar. Now I like grouping things together, so let's go ahead and select these 2 elements by holding Shift and use Command G to group them together. So now these are part of a group. Wherever we move one, the other moves with it because it's moving as a whole. If at any point you want to ungroup things, you can go ahead and hit Command Shift G, and then it will go ahead and ungroup it as you see in the layers. But I'm going to go ahead and group it by hitting Command G and rename this to our navigation bar. Cool. So now if you want to place any elements or change any elements inside of this group, you got to double click into it and then go ahead and change elements. If you're just outside of the group, by moving or changing the objects that you want to change, you're actually making a change to the whole thing. So typically that's not what we want to do. That's why we double click to select certain elements, or as a shortcut you can hit Command and then select an element inside of a group. Perfect. So let's go ahead and now create a component for our posts over here. So anytime we have a design that we're going to reuse, we typically use a component. So that allows us to make changes to one component or the main/master component, so that we don't need to make that change all over the place, and we can just make the change in one place, and that change will be reflected on multiple places or in multiple places. And we're going to see that in action in just a second. So to create a component, I'm going to go ahead and do it outside of our main page here. So I'm going to create a rectangle that's 320 pixels. Let's see if that's a little bit too small. So we can do 335. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a rounded corner radius of 25. I think that looks good. And so this is where the media is going to go, the picture is going to go. And I'm going to go ahead and create an oval at the top, and this is where the profile picture is going to go for the user. Create a text, user name. I'm going to go ahead and change this font size to 18, and I'm going to go ahead and instead of black, make it a little bit lighter, so some sort of a dark gray color like this. You can achieve this color by inputting this code 141414, which is a hex code, into your color selector here, if you want to use exactly the same color. For the font, I'm going to go ahead and use medium for the body, for the font's weight. So that determines how thick your font is. So you could do a bold one or a medium one or a thin one if you want. But in this case, I suggest using a medium. And then let's go ahead and use an oval to create a button down here for the like button as well. And we're going to just make that white color. And we're going to add some shadows to both the background and this circle over here. So select both of them, add an effect of a drop shadow, but we're going to make it more blurry. We're going to do 20 for the blur and keep everything else the same. And for the opacity, let's do 8%, so it's very subtle. And now to make this whole thing a component, let's go ahead and select everything. And then with the selected, let's hit Alt Command K to make that a component. And you can tell by this component one name, but we're gonna go ahead and rename it posts. So now with the benefit of that, we can go ahead and drag instances of that main post component in our designs, which you can also find under assets. Now that we've made this a component, all of our components will show up under local components over here in our assets tab. So now the benefit of that is that we can go ahead and simply drag that into our design. Now we have a copy of that post's instance, and we can go ahead and drag another copy down here. Now keep in mind with your frame, you can go ahead and make it longer if you want, so that you can fit more content within your wireframe or within your mockup. So that's not a problem at all, just like so. Now you can create more copies of that component or what is called instance. And the reason you know they're instances is because, as you can see, when you have them selected over here in the layers panel, they don't have the same shape as the actual main component, which is this one over here. This one has a kind of a diamond filled shape, whereas this one has an empty diamond shape like this. So that's how you tell a main component from its instances. And so now the difference, or to show you how components work, let's say I don't like my like button to actually be on this side. Let's say I want it to be on the left side of the screen or the post. I can go ahead and drag that into the left side. And as you can see, it will go ahead and be reflected on all the instances. I'm going to move that back. Or let's say for some reason I want my username to be 20 pixels instead of 18. Well, there you go. You can go ahead and make that change and then go ahead and align. And it will properly change amongst all of the component instances. If you don't like the background color, you can go ahead and change that from over here as well. You can do a bit of a darker one if you'd like, and so on. So now we want an icon for heart shape, a little heart shape icon over here. So let's go ahead and switch to this resource, and that resource is called flat icon. So head on over to flaticon.com where you can go ahead and actually search for icons. So we're going to do a heart, and you use any of them. I like this one over here. So let's go ahead and download it. And these are free to download, although you do need to give credit to the author once you do use them. So make sure to give attribution to the author of this icon if you do decide to use this icon throughout your project. So now for my download folder, I can go ahead and drag this heart right within Figma, and I can go ahead and make it smaller so it sort of fits into my circle over here. Maybe 40 by 40 should be good. You can do it even a little bit smaller. So hold Shift and Alt together to make it a little bit smaller while keeping its position. I think 32 by 32 is good. And I just made sure that this heart is now part of this component as well, because it's, as you can see, in the same component. So that should be reflected on all the other instances. Perfect. So now we want to go ahead and fill it with some data. But before we do that, we also want an icon up here for going to our chat page. So let's do that by going to flat icon once more and search for message. Let's see what comes up. I'm gonna close that one, and I think this one's good. It's a little chat one. That's downloaded too, so I'm gonna go ahead and drag it into my photo app. Main page, make it smaller, make it 32 by 32, and drag it up here to align it. And one small thing though, when you do use an icon from flat icon, if you download it as a PNG, you can't really change the fill color. So this will definitely have this color, but if you do want to change the color, you'd want to use what's called an SVG file icon, and flat icon provides those at a premium. So if you do want to upgrade to a plan with them, you can use the full SVG icon from there. But for now, we're going to keep it as is. And let's put some sample data in our app. So of course, for the username, you can go ahead and generate random names if you'd like, or you can use plugins by going to plugins, manage plugins, and then going to browse plugins in community. Let's search for sample data and see what comes up. I like this mock over here. I think it allows us to create some sample data. So let's try to install it and see how it works. You can go ahead and search it by this author's name if you haven't found it. Let's go back to our photo sharing app. And now that we have that plugin installed, we're going to go ahead and use it by heading on over to our plugins and doing mock. I'm going to go ahead and select the username here, and what type of data do we want? Let's do first names and do paste. So it actually inputted a fake first name for us there. We can keep doing that for all usernames. And although I'm making changes to an instance of a component, those changes that I make are independent of the main component. So now what will happen is that if I do change the text up here of my main component to whatever I change it to, these wouldn't change anymore because we actually overrid those changes. So if I hit Command Z, I'm going to go and keep that as username. Let's see what else. So with that said, we want some sample photos and we want some sample profile pics as well. So for that one, there's also a plugin to do sample profile photos. So let's go to Manage Plugins, Browse Plugins, and we're going to do avatars and see what comes up. There we go, Avatar Generator. Install that one and head on back over here to open up Avatar Generator. And let's go ahead and select the circle, do insert photo. Cool, do that for this one here. And this one here. Okay, this is an interesting name, so we're going to go ahead and use Mock to generate a new first name for that field. If you do get a random name, you can totally go ahead and try different names until you get what you want. Cool. So that's some sample profile photo. And now we want to put some sample posts or images. And the best app I think to do that or plugin is the Unsplash plugin. I know we're using a lot of plugins, but part of this is to actually show you the power of plugins because you don't need to actually go out from Figma. You can actually go ahead and use all the resources within Figma and never leave the app to complete your mockups. Cool. So I've downloaded that Unsplash plugin or installed it, and now I'm going to go ahead and run it from up here. Unsplash provides some free photos for our use, and they have a lot of photos, by the way, so I definitely encourage you to use it for your projects. Let's go ahead and select one of the fields here, and let's just go ahead and import or input some random photos from Unsplash from their top page. Cool. And there you have it. We have some sample data in our photo app. If you want to go ahead and even prototype this, we can run this in the play or the prototype mode over here. And you can go ahead and see what that will look like. Now, one thing in the prototype mode is that the navigation bar is moving, whereas in a real app, it should stay the same. Another note, I think we should bring these two down a little bit because they're too close to the top. So let's make those two changes. I'm going to hold shift and hit the down arrow to move these objects down by 10 pixels. And I was holding shift to select both of them. And let's go ahead and select the entire group for the navigation bar here. One thing I noticed is that this image here is not part of the navigation bar. So we want to go ahead and make sure we drag that inside of it. And so now all of that is a group. And with the whole group selected, go down to fixed position when scrolling under the constraints. And so now, without needing to refresh, you can go ahead and see what that will look like. And one more thing, we don't really need this extra white space down here. So let's go ahead and make our page smaller or our frame. So that should look perfect. And so one thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and make sure our constraints set up properly so that if the device size does change, our mockup will still work flawlessly. So right now, if I change the width of this mockup, nothing will change. But what we want is certain elements to stretch out and fill the entire thing properly. So we're going to select the rectangle and do a left and right by holding shift and selecting the right one here. We're going to keep this one as just top and center here for the horizontal constraint. And so what that will do is now if I drag this, as you can see, the entire navigation background or rectangle will be dragged and the photo app will also stay in the center. I want to give this image here a right constraint instead of a left one. So now this way it should go ahead and work properly. We want to go ahead and keep the post in the center of the page. So let's do a vertical center over here, which you can select from here as well. And also a horizontal center. So now, no matter what, the post should stay in the middle of the page. Now, as you can see, that didn't get applied to all my other instances. So let's go ahead and also apply that change to these two instances by holding shift and doing the same center. There we go. And so now, as you can see, this should work on most device sizes. Now, of course, if the screen size is way too small, this will at some point fail. So now we've added the constraint here. We've put this together. So now we're ready to work on our chat page. And we're going to do that in just a minute. All right, time to design our chat page. And I think This page should be pretty straightforward. It's very similar to our username over here. And instead of using components, in this time we're going to be using an auto layout feature, which I'll show you how cool that one is. So let's go ahead and just take a look at our wireframe. We want our navigation bar here and a little back button. So let's go ahead and start with that by duplicating our navigation bar out here. And instead of this chat button, which we don't want, and instead of this photo app, we're going to go ahead and write messages. Make sure that's centered. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure everything's aligned properly. So I'm using Alt while I have an element selected to see the distance between different sides of the container. In this case, because it's a group, it will show me the relation with different parts of the, or different sides of this rectangle. Cool. For a back button, we can do a little arrow sort of thing. So when we do, when we go ahead and use a line and draw a line horizontally like this, and I'm going to do a line arrow like this. Actually, we want it to be the other way. And so now if we zoom in, we want to go ahead and make it so small so it's just the arrow like this. And actually we want this side to be the arrow because the back button's pointing this way, and then we want to go ahead and just remove this part of the line itself and just keep it like that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and change the thickness to 2, and let's see, or actually let's do 3 for the thickness actually, and bring it down here, align it with our messages, and that's our back button. Perfect. And so now we want the usernames and the pictures. All right, let's create some components for the usernames that we want to display here. This should be pretty straightforward. We're going to just use the same username over here and bring it down here using Alt. And we're going to do Alt, and we're going to go ahead and create a line underneath as well. That's 414 pixels in width. There we go. Now we're going to do a lighter stroke color. I think that should look good. Let's bring our username, profile picture and the username left until we have pixel of the surround over there. Let's select everything and hit Alt Command K to make a component. And use Alt to create different copies. And we're going to go ahead and duplicate that over and over until we have enough over here. Perfect. And let's go ahead and use the same data plugin that we have, Mock, to come up with some names. So we're going to do type of data, first names, use original, keep everything else the same. And let's go ahead and actually hold Command and Shift and select all of the usernames. And so now if you do paste, it will go ahead and work on all of them at the same time, which is good. And we can do the same thing with the profile images. Just hold Command Shift and go ahead and select everything over here. Do plugin, avatars generated, and insert photos. Give it a minute. It might take some time, but one by one, it will go ahead and add photos to each individual username. Beautiful. And there you have it. That's our app over here. In our chat page, we have our usernames that we have under our messages. And alternatively, you could also add a little right arrow on the side over here. So you typically see that in iPhone app. So if you want to do that, we can do a line this way with a right line arrow, and just go ahead and set the width to 0. So we just have this, and set the stroke color to, let's do a light gray color. and make sure that's also aligned with our username, and set the thickness to 2. And one more time, check the alignment. There we go. Actually, it should be a little bit more to the left. So let's go ahead and move that. There we go. That looks much better. So there we have it. That's a little mock-up of an app similar to Instagram. We have our posts over here. It's a very basic version, but I felt this is what we could kind of fit within, under that hour mark of mini course. If you do want to learn more on how you can actually use Figma to generate beautiful mockups for projects, I do have a course available that you can take. The link will be somewhere over here and also in the description. Thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something today. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to answer.